This is a quick tutorial on the characteristics of life. All organisms have certain characteristics they have in common with all other organisms, certain traits and functions that must be accomplished in order for the organisms to maintain life, and we call those characteristics of life. One of the first ones I want to mention to you is about organization. There seems to be a certain orderly structure that exists. It doesn't matter if you're talking about a single-celled, a unicellular organism, such as the amoeba, or if you're talking about a more complex, a multicellular organism, such as humans, other mammals, snakes, birds, etc. There is an orderly structure. There is an organization that exists. There's some communication that happens within that organism. In the case of multicellular organisms, the cells actually organize themselves into tissues, tissues into organs, and then organs into systems. We see that exhibited in the circulatory system and even in a system like you're looking at right here, the muscular system. That's one of the first characteristics of life, is the organization, the fact that there's an orderly structure that exists within organisms. The cell is the smallest unit. All organisms are made of cells. Unicellular, multicellular. They're all made of cells. It is the smallest unit of structure, the basic unit of life. You might hear it referred to as. It certainly is not the smallest part of an organism, because cells are made of organelles, organelles are made of molecules, molecules are made of atoms, and atoms are made of protons, neutrons, and electrons. But the cell is the smallest part of an organism that is able to maintain its life, able to maintain its living functions. Another characteristic that all organisms have in common is the ability to reproduce, at least at the cellular level. Now, reproduction at an organismal level is not necessary for survival of that individual. It's certainly necessary if the species is going to survive and carry on. Reproduction can either be considered sexual or asexual. It's all about whether or not there is a male and a female sex cell. Are the gametes male and female, or is there no gamete involved and it's just one cell dividing? You're looking at some animals, cows and humans. They both obviously reproduce using sexual reproduction. There's an egg and a sperm involved. But what I'm showing you in these bottom two pictures, this is a hydra who is reproducing asexually. There was not a male hydra and a female hydra, just one hydra. And what is happening is called budding, where there's a little offshoot that is growing from the hydra, and it will be genetically identical to the parent hydra, and you'll end up with two new hydra. The other picture is called binary fission. These are paramecium. Now, what you're seeing in this particular example is a process called conjugation, where they actually transfer a little bit of their genetic material prior to the dividing in half. And that's called binary fission, where they actually just split in two. Both of those are examples of asexual reproduction. In this picture, what we're looking at is growth and development. Now, these are two different characteristics of life, but they kind of go hand in hand. We often think of them together. Growth is just about getting bigger, whether you're going from, the piglet to a, full-grown sow or a boar, or if you're just looking at the little seedling getting larger, that's about growth, typically just adding cells to the organism. Development is what you're getting ready to do right now, or what you're well in the process of doing, puberty. Your body is changing, it's maturing. We've seen development, metamorphosis. You've probably grown up learning about tadpoles, how frogs develop from egg to tadpole to mature frog. In bullfrogs, it takes 2 years for that to happen. You've looked probably at larvae, caterpillars, and how they develop into full-grown butterflies or moths. That metamorphosis is the development process. Puberty is a development process. I like to think of development kind of like maturation, and growth is about getting bigger. Another characteristic of life is called homeostasis. Stasis means to stand, homeo means the same. So how is it that organisms are able to adjust to their environment and yet have a standing internal environment, not having their systems get all disrupted? We see this gentleman down here who is obviously sweating a lot. His body temperature has gone up, and so his body began to sweat to try to help him lower his body temperature back to 98.6, 37 degrees Celsius, where it's supposed to be. Plants are able to go through homeostasis also. What you're seeing here is called phototropism, where the trunk, the stem of this tree is bending towards the sunlight. Probably what happened was the hillside slid a little bit and the tree ended up not facing the sunlight, and so he's redirected his growth towards the sunlight because he needs the sunlight for photosynthesis. In this example, this is a pupil. Your eyes respond to the amount of light that is entering them. Shine the light and the pupil gets smaller. Take the light away and the pupil dilates again. Constriction and dilation, all in response to the amount of light that is coming into the eye. Stimulus and response is related to that homeostatic mechanism. The response is the sweating. The response is the salivating when there's a pizza brought near you. The pizza would be the stimulus. Your eyes constrict and dilate according to the amount of light that there is coming in. Another characteristic of life is energy. Organisms need energy. All organisms have to have some source of energy in order to provide the fuel needed for metabolism to occur. And ultimately, that energy is coming from the sunshine, coming from the sun. The sun shines, the plants are able to go through photosynthesis, capture that sunlight, and transfer it into some sugar molecules. There are organisms out there that eat the plants directly, and then there are other organisms that get that sunlight from the plants because they eat the rabbits that ate the grass. In the case of the rabbit, they're considered autotrophs because they eat the plants directly. And the fox is considered a heterotroph because he cannot produce his own food. He cannot go through photosynthesis. He has to eat the rabbit that eats the grass that grew because of the sunlight. Evolution is another characteristic of life. Again, this is a kind of a tricky one. It's not necessarily referring to an organism, but the species as a whole certainly has to be able to evolve, and if they don't, then the species will die out. What I'm showing you is just evolution of the phone so that you get a sense that evolution is just change over time. Horses certainly have evolved. They are much larger than they used to be. And evolution is driven by natural selection. There are mutations that happen, and those mutations are they either work in the environment or they don't work in the environment. If they work in the environment, or at least don't work against the organism, then the organism can survive and reproduce and pass it on. This looks kind of like a twig that maybe's got some dead leaves growing on it, when in fact what it is an entire organism. It is actually a walking stick that through the different generations has evolved to look the way it does, and it stays fairly hidden, and it's very successful. This is a little scenario about bacteria. Evolution happens, folks. Evolution is real and it happens. And we see that all the time. Our bacteria are becoming resistant to antibiotics. You have a bacteria that gets some strange, weird mutation that allows him to survive the chemical treatment, the antibiotic. He survives and reproduces, and now you have 2 of them. They reproduce and you have 4, and pretty soon you have entire colonies and populations of bacteria that are resistant to the antibiotic. This has just been a really quick tutorial on some of the characteristics of life.